microwave for you or the oil, they annoy you. You add another's neck for the wrong reasons. Election years now seeming like full-blown seasons.
Welcome to 3 Count Commentaries. Today we're going to be talking about episode 7 of WWEEVIL, which is on the Nature Boy. Woo! Ric Flair. And this one pretty much speaks for itself. If you know anything about Nate, you know the character of the Nature Boy. You know, limousine riding, jet flying, wheeling, dealing, kiss stealing, son of a gun. It says it all. That's everything you need to know about Nate. And as short as possible. Flair, the absolute embodiment of avarice, the embodiment of greed and excess, a lust demon, you know, the Nature Boy. Everything about Ric Flair is absolutely fantastic. The archetype of Ric Flair is basically the man who has everything. You know, where do you get the guy who can buy the alligator shoes? You know, the $10,000 Rolex, the Brooks Brothers suit. You know, at that point, man, it's just about power. It's about position. It's about status. And that's what I really loved about Ric Flair. They spent a lot of time in this documentary talking about how Ric Flair has become a pop culture icon. And they also spent more time, however, doing the obvious, which is talking about Ric Flair and class warfare. That Ric Flair, you know, was the embodiment of the wealth class of the late 70s and early 80s. You know, if you watch the movie Wall Street, you know, you've seen the Gordon Gekko. I think he's even called the Gordon Gekko of wrestling by Sam Roberts in this documentary. Gordon Gekko, fantastic character, by the way. Gordon Gekko in Wall Street was sort of this, I don't know if he was a hedge fund manager, but he was more of a shark kind of investor who invested in companies just to hollow the company out, fire all the employees, you know, break contracts, and then sell the company at a profit. That was generally the Gordon Gekko idea. And so as a corruptive force in terms of Wall Street, he was basically trying to, for lack of a better word, seduce the younger partners that he had messed with. I think it's Charlie Sheen, or, you know, and talking him into, and this was insider trading, which is why he ended up going to jail in the movie. Talking to him into getting his dad's company and trying to sell, not his dad's company, but his dad was a union worker. So it was set up as absolutely the epitome of wealth in Gordon Gekko versus the son of a union man. And I've talked about this before in another movie, which was A Bronx Tale, where you had the working man as a sucker. You know, this has that sort of idea that permeates through the movie, is that the working class guy is always seen as the underdog. And he's the guy who's honest. He gets up and he goes to work every day. He doesn't make a lot of money, but it's an honest day and it's for honest pay. While the dirtiest players in the game, the guys who cut corners, they make tons of money. Gordon Gekko was insider trading. The gangster Sonny in A Bronx Tale, he's running all types of illegal businesses, and he makes much more money than Calogero's father. That's how the class warfare concept really plays out, is that the rich are not just rich, but they always get away with being incredibly unfair. They always get away with breaking the rules. And in the NWA, they did a really good job of having rules and in the place that could be easily work in Ric Flair's favor. For instance, there was a conversation I had where, you know, I think it was the over the top rope rule. I think Jim Cornette had a video about that. And I said, like, you have no idea how many NWA championship matches were ruined because of that goofy over the top rope rule. Now, I hate the rule. You know, the rule, for people who don't know, you throw your opponent over the top rope as a disqualification. So which will happen, and I think it happened in one match against with Kevin Von Erich was wrestling Ric Flair for the NWA World Heavyweight title, is during the match, the referee is bumped, or the referee is distracted. Ric Flair ends up going over the top rope, probably from a tornado punch or something like that. And, the referee doesn't call it immediately. Instead, Von Erich gets the claw on Flair. Flair's down. Flair can't move. And then the referee all of a sudden wants to reverse the decision because Flair went over the top rope. It's like, oh, are you serious? And it happens so many times in so many matches, but they were masters at bending the rules and at masters at nailing that story. The story is Ric Flair is the guy who gets whatever he wants. And even when you think you got him beat, he finds a way to make the rules work in his favor. And that's a really powerful message to send to people. And they end up getting that because it's what they see on the news. It's what they see, every time they open a newspaper and they see some corrupt politician getting less time for being corrupt than, one of their nephews who was selling a little bit of weed. The fucking kid gets 15 years or something like that. And some guy steals $10,000 or takes $10,000 in kickbacks. He goes to jail for 2 years, and then 80% of his time is him with an ankle monitor going to Whole Foods, or whatever. That's the kind of world we inhabit. It's the world Ric Flair seems to be excited about, that makes him happy, is that he does have special privileges. He can have all these nice things. He can, drive the nicest cars and bang all these chicks and live this life of excess. And you can't. You'll never be me. Your children are a fan of mine. And it's a direct dichotomy with the son of the plumber, Dusty Rhodes. And, of course, Dusty was kind of going too far when he started wearing like mink coats and stuff like that, or fur coats. He was kind of going too far. But the idea, of course, is that Dusty is the everyman. Even when you look at them physically, Flair is physically fit. He's blonde. He's, not quite tanned, but he looks like a man who has everything. He has extra time to go to the gym. He's well coiffed. He's well dressed. Everything's perfect. Dusty, on the other hand, he's not dressing like a slob, but he's dressed like an average Joe. Oftentimes Dusty would even put on like a trucker's hat in order to sort of get and sort of get the visual together. And he's fat. He looks like an average guy. And when he looks like an average guy, it helps, tell the story, because wrestling is a visual medium. You can listen to it and get something from it. But to be quite honest, if you're doing it right, you need to actually be watching, and the visual story that they tell in wrestling, when you have a fat son of a plumber, and god damn, a plumber. I mean, are there any skinny plumbers? Almost every plumber has the stereotype of, he bends over and his ass crack is showing. When you have that, stereotype in your mind, and have that, as something that you're springboarding off of and sort of, for storytelling, Dusty looks absolutely perfect for the job, and Flair looks perfect for his job, as he's not quite the American Psycho some guys, a guy like Randy Orton, will become later, where, he's not just in shape, but not just fit. I'm talking like pathologically in shape. I'm talking like haven't had a carb since Clinton was in office, in shape. I'm talking, a guy who's probably spends more time in the gym than anywhere else, and spends more time in the mirror sculpting his body than doing anything else. Flair wasn't that, it wasn't nearly as bad as it would become in the 2000s as far as guys being in shape. But for his time, yeah, Flair looked amazing. He was fit. He wasn't Hogan. He wasn't big and muscular, but he was really good. And so it told the visual story very well. You see Dusty come out in his little jacket, and Dusty's jacket wasn't too shabby, but it wasn't the $10,000, $20,000 robe that Ric Flair had. And that was the nature of the character. It's based off of trying to elicit envy from the audience. Flair was all about getting people to hate him because he bragged so much, but also because they wished they had his lifestyle, that they would be envious of him, that they would want somebody like Dusty to take him down a peg for no other reason than he could stop his bragging, but also maybe, just maybe, if somebody takes something from him, maybe, someone else can be elevated. People don't mind if you're doing better than them. They just don't want you talking about it. So, that's part of, one of my two favorite quotes I've ever heard in a wrestling documentary. The other one is, people don't mind, you doing good. They just don't want to hear that you're doing better than them. So I will add to that. People don't mind that you're doing better than them. They just don't want to hear about it. So when you have a guy like Flair and he's doing better than you and he won't shut the hell up about it, and you look at him and he just has this perfect, everything about him just comes across as being perfect, not a hair out of place, in shape, getting chicks, got the gift of gab and the gift of jab. He can do it all. That's going to elicit some envy. And there's going to be a part of that audience who's going to hate him because he's braggadocious and loud and arrogant and cocky and he's denigrating their values. One of the things that they played is how, Flair says to Ricky Steamboat, who is another excellent working class hero, because, Ricky Steamboat is a married man. And Flair says that you got to be bored laying with the same woman every night. Like, people are like, you're talking about people in the South here, below the Bible Belt. These people are like, they are la gasp. How dare you, Flair? In the 1980s, it was the 1970s. It wouldn't become quite what it was in the 90s and the 2000s, where that kind of stuff would be like, yeah, Flair was on point with that. Back then, man, family values was a real thing. And people saw Steamboat as being a guy who had good moral character. He married his wife and he have a son. And he's dedicated to that wife and that son. And here comes Flair, who's probably got children around this time. And he's fucking off, screwing prostitutes and groupies in hotel rooms. And he's drunk all the time. He's spending all his money. And he didn't come across as being the hero that they wanted. But you got Dusty Rhodes and you got Ricky Steamboat, two guys who definitely fit the mold of what the average person aspires to be. A working class hero in a situation where you're going face to face with everything that you ever hated. If you can beat up John D. Rockefeller or Andrew Carnegie, would you do it? Now, Flair was obviously probably not as wealthy as those guys, but in the minds of that generation, it would be like punching your boss in the face. What Vince McMahon will become in later years. What Ted DiBiase would become in later years. That's what Flair was in the NWA at the time. And that was the nature of the Nature Boy. That was the core of the Nature Boy. His confidence, he exuded success. And you felt like either you wanted to be like him or you hated him, because you knew at least part of his success came from underhanded tactics and backstabbing and rule breaking. And how could you cheer a guy like that? How could you support a guy who acts that way when he succeeds doing the kinds of things that he did? You wouldn't. So this was a fun episode. If you've seen all of the Ric Flair storylines and the documentaries, then you know his backstory already. So that was pretty much what it was. And then they talked a lot about his influence on pop culture. So this was a really fun episode. And but let me know what you guys thought in the comment section below. Like, share, and subscribe, and I'll talk to you guys later.
Tell me what's worse than learning all that you led to believe was all horse crap. They distort, so question as if you